It's time for another edition of Lewis at Large, 60 minutes of smart talk radio featuring guests from all walks of life in conversation with your host, Warner Lewis. So sit back and lend us your ears for the next hour. Now here with today's first guest is the host of Lewis at Large, Warner Lewis.
Well, welcome everybody to another edition of Lewis at Large. Yours truly, Warner Lewis from the flight deck. And of course, that means some smart talk radio is in your future. And this segment, very pleased to have with us a woman that works very hard on behalf of others. Her name is Michelle Herling. She is the founder and the executive director of the Compassionate Touch Network. And it is a very, very interesting organization. They're based out of Santa Fe, New Mexico. They're a nonprofit organization, and they promote community health and social advocacy through education, healing, and the arts as well. Should be an interesting discussion indeed. Michelle, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
Well, we're good here. This is the time of the year that we're always interested and maybe pay a little bit more attention at others and their wherewithal and how they're doing. Share, if you would, with our Lewis at Large listeners about the idea behind the Compassionate Touch Network and a little bit of its history.
The Spirit of Compassionate Touch Network actually began in 1995, although we didn't become a full-blown organization until 2011. And in 95, I was reading about stories in regards to Bosnia and realized that I really wanted to go over and work with women and children there. And so that's what I went ahead and did. I actually made, between 1995 and 2002, 13 trips over there and worked with teachers who then, we trained Bosnian teachers to go into the schools and work with their students to help reduce the post-traumatic stress disorder. So that was the beginning of my working with mental illness, because post-traumatic stress disorder is a major mental illness. I also grew up with a brother who has a mental illness, and his illness began at an early age. We don't know whether it was triggered by a car accident that he had, where he had a traumatic brain injury, kind of a chicken and egg thing, but no matter, he has had an illness since probably around age 12. And this is a very difficult time of year for him. This is the time of year when he starts thinking about taking his life, and so we are in constant contact with him. He lives in the area we live in, and talking with him and asking him direct questions like, how are you thinking of doing that? How are you thinking of taking your life? And for the first time this year, he actually came up with a plan that he actually could carry out, which concerned us. So we're just making sure we're in constant contact with him.
Michelle, you mentioned your sibling. Is the Compassionate Touch Network, though, you talked about work overseas. This is domestic as well as overseas, correct?
Yes. My work is now fully domestic. What the outcome was that I took a NAMI program called Family to Family, and NAMI is the National Alliance on Mental Illness. And the Family to Family program is a completely free 12-week program that works with and teaches people who have family members who have a loved one with an illness, gives them a lot of information, helps them develop some communication skills, and also helps them to talk with psychiatrists and kind of take some power in that conversation with the service providers for your loved one. As a result of that, I just was so taken with this program that I became a facilitator, a volunteer facilitator. And it was during one of the classes that I looked up at the group and said, I'm thinking I want to advocate for more than my brother. And as a result of that, the next morning I woke up and realized I wanted to do a set of monologues where people both with an illness as well as family members who have a loved one would write their story. We would help them edit their story And then those stories would go on to a professional stage. So that was the beginning of Minds Interrupted, Stories of Lives Affected by Mental Illness, which is one of two core projects of the Compassionate Touch Network.
Michelle, and again, I want to, just for some clarity here, the Minds Interrupted is focused exclusively, 99% on those with mental illness, those that are touched by it, et cetera, in creative ways in which to make those situations better. The overall Compassionate Touch Network, though, covers all kinds of not only mental illness, but also social injustice at some level and social challenges, correct?
Yes, it does. And there is social injustice in regards to people living with mental illness and families impacted by mental illness. Our organization is growing. As I said, in 2011, we became a nonprofit, and our organization is growing and incorporating projects as they seem like they meet our mission. And the two core projects that we have are focused in on mental health and mental illness right now. And those projects are focused also in on social advocacy and social justice, because even though there is a parity bill that came through Congress, that parity has not really stepped up to the plate quite yet. My sister and I, who also lives in this area, have gone in to sit with psychiatrists to talk with my brother as we were, changing from one psychiatrist to another. And as family members, my brother wanted us there. We were treated so poorly. We were considered overprotective, that we were not allowing our brother to make his own choices, none of that being true. Our brother has an inability to tell a story with enough detail, so we were there to add to the detail to help these providers to have some information and not have to spend months or even years getting bits and pieces of information, which is the way he shares his life, just because of who he is.
Yeah, if you've just joined us, yours truly, Warner Lewis, from the flight deck of Lewis at Large Radio. You're in the middle of some Smart Talk Radio. Our guest this segment is Executive Director and the founder of the Compassionate Touch Network and Minds Interrupted, Michelle Herling. They are based out of Santa Fe, New Mexico, but their work is international in scope, dealing with those with mental illness, also those facing at certain levels social injustice, not only, again, here in the United States, but also around the world. Michelle, you said you took multiple trips to Bosnia, and that triggers, of course, the inevitable question of who is funding these efforts, who funded it early on, and what does your organization as a nonprofit, how do you get funding?
Initially, with the Bosnia trips, it was totally grassroots, Warner. It was my cooking meals and inviting 100 people over and asking them just to make donations. It was family and friends donating money to give me the ability to go over. There was also another colleague that joined me, actually a friend, 2 years into the project, and she did the same. We just talked to our family and friends and did a lot of grassroots fundraising that way. In 2011, when Compassionate Touch Network became nonprofit, that gave us an ability to be able to start to write grants. So we have gotten grants from the Department of Health, New Mexico. We have received grants through the New Mexico Children's Foundation, through the New Mexico Commission on the Arts, through the Colm Alma Foundation. So there have been a number of foundations, both family and government, that have funded us so that we are able to do both Minds Interrupted and then a second core project called Breaking the Silence New Mexico, which is going into middle and high school classrooms and offering lessons on mental illness in either health or psychology classes usually. So some of that money goes towards training facilitators to go into the classrooms and talk about mental illness and share personal story to put a human face on mental illness. So much of what we're doing now is how can we break through the stigma around mental illness? How can we break through the silence and the shame and the secrecy? Because those things are holding people back from seeking the help they need. And so our work in the schools helps students to begin to understand what might be going on in their lives, meaning whether it is family members that they're living with that might be acting or showing some symptoms of mental illness, or maybe they themselves are wondering why they're having so many problems. And so we can guide them to school wellness areas in their particular school to be able to possibly seek some help if they have concern. Depression is huge in our school system. Youth, teens are just really faced with so much stress, and stress can be one trigger for depression. All of these illnesses are biochemical in nature, and 1 in 10 adolescents will be diagnosed with a mental illness.
How much, again, you're based out of Santa Fe, you've done some international work. How far-reaching at this point is CTN, the Compassionate Touch Network, in terms of other areas, either in New Mexico or in other states?
We are far-reaching with our Minds Interrupted project. We have been in Baltimore, Maryland at Center Stage with a completely sold-out crowd of 517 people. We have been in St. Paul, Minnesota with a crowd of 450 people attending. We go into various communities around the country to work with their community members to write their stories and bring them to stage. And we have been in San Antonio, Texas as part of the NAMI National Convention. And we've done a lot of presentations here in New Mexico, in both rural areas here, as well as in the cities of Albuquerque and Santa Fe.
So you said you work with the schools. I would think that some of this work also would be with the mental health community and that entire genre, and sort of not necessarily bringing them out of the closet, so to speak, but making them a little bit more front and center and helping the general public understand a little bit more of the mission of their work. Is that a fair statement or not true?
That is a really fair statement. Beautifully said. We have begun to develop what we call community forums, where we have developed community forums, and those forums have been at conferences around this state, and those forums focus in on sharing 3 stories by people who have an illness, and then afterwards we have a question and answer period with a psychiatrist, the three presenters on a panel asking questions. So some of the conferences we've been at are conferences of social workers and guidance counselors. We have been talking with the police department to see if they would like to set up community forums. This approach seems to be really, really strong. People's response to hearing these stories and then being able to ask questions seems to be a really perfect combination.
What about, again, if you just joined us, we are talking about a very interesting organization called the Compassionate Touch Network, and one of their sub-organizations, affiliated organizations called Minds Interrupted, based out of Santa Fe, New Mexico, working with those with mental illness and spreading the word and the understanding about it. Also working in a variety of other charitable or other work around the world. Michelle, as the executive director and founder, as you look forward to 2015 in the coming years, how do you know sort of how to expand to, and how do you take on different projects? And are you now at a point where you're getting requests for help versus you just sort of taking them on proactively.
Yes, that's exactly what's happening. People from different areas in the country are reaching out to us and talking with us about bringing a Minds Interrupted into their community. And usually it's a behavioral health organization, and specifically, again, NAMI, National Alliance on Mental Illness, that has over 1,500 affiliates across the country. And I promote them because they were my emotional home around mental illness. They really helped me to expand my heart and my horizons informationally around mental illness. As in terms of breaking the silence, going into the schools, we can't keep up with the demand of schools around the state of New Mexico, because breaking the silence is just in New Mexico. We cannot keep up with the demand. We are being asked to come into more places in northern New Mexico as well as southern New Mexico. So we are doing 3 trainings a year as opposed to 1 training a year, which we have done in the past couple of years. And that's exciting because it lets us know that people are starting to recognize that these illnesses need to be talked about, need to be shared with one another. People need to understand what they are. And students get to see that through the eyes of a PowerPoint that we do that focuses in somewhat on celebrities who are stepping out and beginning to talk about their own mental illness. And definitely, right after Robin Williams' suicide, when we would go in and begin to start our lessons, students would always bring that up. Well, what about Robin Williams? How could he have had depression? He was like a comedian. And so we help them to make some of those connections that they're already making, which is exciting for us.
What about organizations that are similar to yours, or at least as part of their overall work, do some work that is similar in nature? Do you coordinate with them, or tell us about that?
Yes, we organizations that reach out to us that are all behaviorally focused. We talk with them about their goals and what they're looking for to make sure that what we have to offer is what they're looking for. And we always promote the organizations in each area that we're working with. There are, at the Minds Interrupted, which are public presentations in professional theaters, there are inevitably a number of information tables that are set up. We just completed a Minds Interrupted in Albuquerque a couple of months ago, and we had the crisis intervention team from the police department had set up an information table, as well as the National Alliance on Mental Illness Albuquerque set one up, as well as an organization from the Bernalillo County. So we really are, part of what we want to do is promote the resources that are available. My passion is mental illness, mental health in communities, and it is community building and helping these organizations by supporting a networking that goes on through the use of our programs. I'm leaving the area after the program is done, but I'm hoping that some of that networking is still building and moving forward, and in talking with various people from areas that we have been in presenting Minds Interrupted, we are finding out that is happening, that some of those connections are building, and that's what my hope is.
Well, help me understand this. When you say you're leaving the area when the program is done, do you feel like you're going to reach some kind of a finish line, or help us with that?
Well, for instance, when we went into Baltimore, we were there for a few weeks solidly, working with people to write their story. I had been working with the organization, National Alliance on Mental Illness Metropolitan Baltimore. I had been working with them for about 6 months. And then we come in, land, begin to work with people who are going to step up to the stage presence, and then we leave. We stay in contact with organizations, but because I live in New Mexico and my colleague does too, after the presentation, we leave, and we hope we're leaving not only having offered a fabulous presentation, but hoping that we're leaving having connected through getting the word out about Mind Interrupted in each specific community through radio interviews, through newspaper articles, and through advertising, that community has gotten a little bit stronger, and more organizations are talking to one another because they recognize that they're doing work that is complementary, if not similar.
Does it feel like it's getting out of hand, so to speak? Are you getting too many requests? Is it getting too busy, or is it kind of pacing how you need it to be?
I think it's pacing how we need it to be. As we get more requests, we are able to grow a little bit more. There's one part-time staff person plus myself. There's a lot of people that come on board when a specific project is happening in a specific area, but it feels as if we're able to keep pace, maybe trying to catch our breath periodically, which I think is good.
Well, it is a very, very fascinating organization. They've taken on quite a challenge. They are the Compassionate Touch Network, and within that organization, Minds Interrupted, working very closely with those concerned and in the mental health community and those affected by mental health issues. And their executive director, Michelle Herling, has been our guest. Michelle, thank you so much for joining us. We would like to know if our listeners want to find out more about the organization and more about Minds Interrupted as well. How can they do that?
There is a website for Minds Interrupted, www.mindsinterrupted.com. And on that webpage, you will find information about Compassionate Touch, and you also find information about Breaking the Silence New Mexico. Or you can call me at 505-982-0904. That's 505-982-0904. And I'm happy to speak with anybody that has interest in bringing Minds Interrupted to their community. 1 in 4 people is affected by mental illness. So, unfortunately, we're going to be kept busy for a long time.
Indeed. Again, thank you for your work and your contribution. And again, thanks for spending a few minutes with us here today.
Thank you so much, Warner.
You bet. We will be back with more right after this on Lewis at Large.